welcome to After Sunday Podcast, our After Sunday Podcast with me, Cory Alstead. I'm the worship pastor at North Langley for another 3.5 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that.
Sad.
I know, it feels a little sad. And then Matthew, our esteemed lead pastor.
Cory, we're all gonna miss you.
Oh, thanks. I know, I'm gonna miss this community a lot, actually. Although again, I'm not. I keep on saying we're not actually leaving anywhere. We're just, my role is I'm leaving the role, but not the community. Yeah. So I know.
Fair.
Yeah, definitely lots of sadness and, looking forward to it's kind of it's been coming for a long time. So you kind of look forward to being finished with kind of crossing over, but also really, it also gets sadder and sadder actually as I have great experiences, rehearsal the other night, and I'm like, oh, I'll just miss doing this on a regular basis for sure. So yeah.
So just in front of our podcast audience here, would you consider changing your mind?
Yeah.
About your decision?
No, no, it's too far gone.
Aww.
Yeah, no, But I like I said, we intend on being part of this community down after.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, which is awesome. So yeah. we're excited about that. It'll be different. Yeah.
We got some questions. We got a question.
Oh, on YouTube. Yeah.
About our pets.
Our pets, right? Yes.
An update on our pets.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
I think we had some conversations about our pets in the past.
We have. Yeah.
And maybe some people are wondering how we're doing. So Cory, let me open with this.
Yes.
Do you still prefer animals over people? Like for instance, if I threw out an ethical dilemma to you,
oh boy,
your dogs are Sully and
Billy. Yes, Billy. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Imagine. Well, which one do you have a big heart for?
I have a heart for both of them. I it's like picking who's your favorite kid.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
It's off to a good start.
You heard it here. First, his dogs and children are unequal. But here's your ethical dilemma.
Okay. Yeah.
Pick Sully.
Okay, Sully. Yeah.
You're in a storm.
I'm in a storm.
And you are there with Adolf Hitler.
Okay.
Hold on.
He's really old by now.
He's done all of the horrible things.
Okay.
He's not going to do any more horrible things. So it's not like...
That's good. Okay.
But he still is who he is and what he did.
Okay.
And there's Sully.
Okay.
And you have to choose. You can only save one from the storm. Which one would you choose?
Okay. From the storm.
Yeah, the boat sinking. So
we're in the
sorry,
in the
it's
water.
a storm. You're in the water, and there's a boat that's sinking.
And what is sorry, can you just describe the rescue a little bit more? How am I able to save Sully or Adolf?
There's one hook that's been lowered from a helicopter.
Okay.
And you're about to go over the falls, and so you can only one can
falls?
grab. There's a waterfalls.
Oh, okay.
The waterfalls.
I thought we were in the ocean. I was like, I didn't.
No. Okay, so you're on a boat,
yeah.
and so you're there, and then you're you've got this hook, and you can only grab one up with you into the helicopter. Is it Sully or Adolf Hitler?
Wow, that's it's interesting that you picked Adolf Hitler.
Yeah.
Well, Matthew, here's the thing. I would grab both. Is what I would do. Yeah. No, I would. Yeah. Okay.
Doesn't work.
Okay.
It should be easy for you.
Yeah. No.
You always grab the human.
I know. I feel like you're setting up a straw man. That I have never said that I like humans more than animals. I don't understand why I have to pick. Like what?
The waterfall.
Okay. Okay.
There's a waterfall.
Right.
We're moving towards a waterfall.
Yeah. Okay.
You have to make a choice.
Okay. Well, look, I would if I had to make a choice in that moment. Sherry, you should hit pause at this point on YouTube. I would pick Adolf.
Yay!
Of course I would. Okay.
Woo!
Wow.
That's good.
Yeah, down the hatch.
No, that makes me feel very excited.
Okay, good. I'm glad.
Yes.
But we were going to talk about our pets.
How's Sully doing?
Sully's doing great. Sully is awesome. Billy is awesome. They are literally like our little children. We love them so much. Yeah. It is kind of prep for grandchildren is what it feels like. We just
really?
Yeah, kind of.
In what way?
They're just we just love them. They have such great little personalities. They're very loyal. Sherry had a migraine all day yesterday, and Billy will literally not leave her side. Billy just knows, so she'll go up and she'll jump into bed, and she'll just be right close to her.
That is cool.
And won't leave all day. Yeah,
that's cool.
They're great. Yeah, we love them. They're just really, really loyal, and it's kind of they just kind of love you more than they love themselves. That's kind of what they're like. They just seem to really care about you. So they're great. Yeah. How about you? How's your cat. Just joking. I like cats.
Don't worry. You probably already love my cat more than I love my
I
cat.
probably do. You know who really would love your Delaney Schultz, who is not Schultz, sorry, Delaney Alstead, Max's wife. I know. She loves cats.
Does she?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So she would love your cat. But I like cats too.
Sparky's good.
Yeah,
Sparky's
Sparky.
okay. Sparky is well loved by our children, by Tanya. Sparky and I are still growing in our relationship.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good.
Sparky, I think, maybe was eating the wrong food for a while and kept throwing up.
Oh, that's
How
tough.
gross is that?
It's sad too, because it probably doesn't feel very good for Sparky, right, to throw up.
Okay. Have empathy for the cat.
Yeah, okay,
What about for
I
me?
do have empathy for the cat. Oh, did you have to clean something up? Oh,
A lot.
that sounds hard. Okay, you got a lot of feist today, Matthew. This is
I
gonna
do.
Be, yeah, it's gonna be. Yeah, I can tell this is not going well. Okay.
Hey, the other thing
Yeah.
is because we like podcasts.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Quick, wanted to make a podcast recommendation
Okay.
to everyone, but because you're here
Yeah.
as a musician,
Yes.
one of my favorite podcasts is The Rest is History.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And they just did, I think maybe last month, a 2-part one on Mozart and Beethoven. So part
awesome.
1 is Mozart, part 2 is Beethoven. And they did it live in the Royal Albert Hall. And they have like orchestra doing numbers. And it's
wow.
really beautiful. It's cool to learn about Mozart and Beethoven, their lives, and
So cool.
to hear the
I
pieces. And
love that. I haven't heard that. I've listened to some of their stuff, but I haven't heard some of the podcasts, but I haven't heard that one. So I'll check it out.
yeah.
Sounds great. Yeah.
Would you have one? A podcast?
Oh
recommend?
yeah. I listen to the Daily, New York Times Daily, which I most days I listen to it on 1.25 times. I've discovered that's like a good way to do it. A
Yes.
little bit faster, so it doesn't take excuse me, quite as long. It's only like 25 minutes, half an hour. But
Sure.
I do like, so this one is like, so Smartless, I like. Smartless is good. There's sometimes, it gets a little bit, depending on your filter and stuff, it can be a little risque sometimes. Lots of swearing. But they're just, these 3 friends are just so funny, and it's just fun. They have like, well, you've listened to it.
Yeah,
lots
they've got
too.
great guests.
They have a
Yeah.
guest where the two of the hosts won't know who it is. One of the hosts has arranged it, and so they have to try to kind of guess who it is, and then the person comes on. I like that one a lot.
fun.
That's fun. And then what's the Alex O'Connor one that you and I have talked about
Within
before?
Reason.
Within Reason. That's a fun one. Like, he often has interesting guests, and yeah, he's like not an atheist. He'd say he's agnostic now. I think he'd say he's violently agnostic is what he thinks.
Okay. Yeah.
But he's the kind of guy, what I like about him is that he really truly seems to want to be a Christian.
Yeah.
Like, he's like this guy who's like, I really want to believe, I just can't. I can't. So
Agreed.
he actually, in these conversations, it's kind of sweet because he's really actually, you can tell he's pretty earnest about it, like he wants to know. So yeah. That's a good one. That's interesting.
I've really grown to like him. I feel like the way he has dialogue with people and how smart he is and the way he challenges guests, he does it really well.
Yeah, he totally, very, very gracious, yeah.
Okay, Cory.
Okay, yeah.
You ready?
I'm ready.
So just a quick recap, and I want to hear your thoughts on
Okay.
the sermon, and then I have a few new things that I wanted to talk about that didn't fit into the message.
Okay, sounds good.
So the first one is just a recap. We talked about being exiles in a foreign land. We talked about how Christians see their identity as immigrants, foreigners in a strange land from 1 Peter 1:1, which reads, Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, to God's elect, exiles scattered throughout the provinces of Pontus, Galatia, and so on. And so our question was, okay, if we are exiles, if that's our identity, how should we engage politically? How far should we go in seeking the shalom or the peace of the place where we're at?
Right.
This isn't our home, but God wants us to seek the peace of this place. And so I gave kind of 2 options. One was the alternative community model, and the other was the Joseph Daniel Esther model. So these are 2 different ways Christians have viewed this.
Yes.
And just a short recap of that, and then I want to hear what you think. But one would be, so the alternative community model says, listen, we're in exile, our allegiance is to Jesus, and we should work on being a counterculture that's removed. We still engage society, but we do it through this kind of nonviolent love. We don't run for office. We wouldn't serve in the military. We're hesitant to teach in public schools. We're hesitant to work government jobs. Some would even say, let's not vote because voting is a compromise. Let's be this counterculture. And our Anabaptist Mennonite heritage is that.
Yes, right.
Swing to the other side of the pendulum is option 2, the Joseph Daniel Esther model. And it says, of course we need to engage in politics. Like Joseph, Daniel, and Esther, they were all in exile, and yet they were just amazing contributors to the halls of power. The Pharaoh, Nebuchadnezzar, and Xerxes in Persia, they were all blessed, learned about God, were able to fear God in some ways because of Joseph, Daniel, and Esther's faithfulness. And so I think the idea here is that politics is just a tool. It's how we steward life in Canada. It could be done really bad, but it could be done well. And we as Christians should be part of seeing it done well. And wouldn't we want the values of Jesus to transform a nation? So the idea, the final thing I'll say here before we chat about it, but just the idea is that the contribution of the idea of the Imago Dei, that we're all created equal. Every human being is created equal. That's a biblical idea that has benefited society. And so thank goodness that there were Christians that were able to be part of seeing that value inform some of our documents.
Yes,
Political ideas. And so, So that pendulum, that spectrum, what did you feel like?
Totally, I really appreciated it. It was nice to kind of have some clarity around that, because it's like, I guess that it makes sense. And I like that you didn't really say, one side or the other is. You ended by saying, like, the answer is like, yes, they can both be good. I felt like in some ways it seemed as though you leaned, and I don't know and you can talk about this if you want. I leaned a little bit more towards the Joseph, Daniel, and Esther model. Like it just because it seemed like a bit more of a robust argument, or at least the representation on your part. That's what I thought when I was listening to the sermon. I'm not sure if that's you can respond.
It was funny because when we chatted about this earlier, I was like, oh, that's funny to hear you say that, because I'm actually more drawn to the alternative community model, and I've been learning a lot about the Joseph, Daniel, Esther model, and I tried to give it its best shot, and not to strawman anything, and maybe I overdid it. And maybe it sounded like I believed in that one more. I've actually traditionally believed way more in the alternative community. Like I thought, don't even be involved in politics. Like run away. That's been my default mode for like 20 years. Like that's how I think. I don't think, oh, political office is great. I feel like it's a walking compromise. So anyway, so it's interesting that it. You felt like
that was just it wasn't like it didn't feel heavy-handed. I think I just thought that for me I feel like I'm like, as per usual, I'm always somewhere in the middle, I guess, but I think I admire both sides when you see it done well, like our Martin Luther King is an obvious example where it's like it's done very, very well, right?
Yes.
I feel like unfortunately there's lots of, especially I would say maybe on the Joseph, Daniel, and Esther side, I feel like there's just a lot of times when I see that where I feel like it's not done well, where it doesn't seem like it's like the Jesus ethic as much as it seems like, a bit more of a conservative, traditional Old Testament, whatever, kind of. I just feel like it can mean so many things, right? And we talked a bit about this last time, I think, when someone says, I'm just standing up for the truth, like I'm a Christian and I'm standing up for the truth. Like for me, that's not enough. Like I'm always like, I need to know a little bit more what you mean when you say that, because that can mean, that's why we need capital punishment. That's why it's like, okay. But if they're like, that's why we need to care for, the downtrodden and the outcast, and we need to really treat, foreigners, immigrants with like, we obviously there's an issue here, but we have to find a way to do this in a humane as possible way, a way to really honor the Imago Dei. Like that's different to me than it. It can mean so many things. I've had a lot of admiration on the other side for people like, I don't know if I was thinking about the Quaker movement, which I don't know a ton about. A very pacifist movement, and very much very removed from politics getting involved. Obviously Menno Simons, who's like, the Anabaptist, like that, very much choosing to not wade into things of politics. I was really interested in, I read a book a number of years ago called Mountain of Silence, and it was memoirs of this, I think it was a journalist who went to Mount Athos, called the Holy Mountain or the Mountain of Peace or something. There's a name for it. And there's a ton of monasteries there, and Christian monks like Orthodox monks, and who live their entire lives in prayer in these mountains, like a very, very simple life. They garden, but most of their life it's like very, very simple. They pray, and they really see this as the calling that God has put in their life, and they spend they see themselves as interceding for the world. And I remember one. It was quite interesting reading, because one of the monks, they were talking to this guy and saying, "Oh, this monk over here, he's this amazing. Everyone looks up to him." And he, I forget what he said. Something like, this is back when the Gulf War happened. What was that? Early 2000s, late.
Which one?
Like under George Bush Senior.
Yeah,
the Iraq.
early 90s.
Yeah. So. But they said, we really believe that it would have been, that basically they were saying like our prayers were like, they were so focused on praying, they think the war would have been much worse had they not been like these prayers. Yeah, so you're like, wow, that's pretty lofty. But there's something very beautiful about that. Carlos Corretto was an author that I used to read, and he was part of this little group called the Little Brothers of Christ, the Little Brothers of Jesus, and they were almost reminded me a bit of the Desert Fathers. Like they were very, again, this is back in the 70s and 80s, I think, but very, choosing to really be an alternate society, and fully devoted to prayer and a simple life, and care for the poor, the needy, bringing people into their area and stuff. Anyways, so
would you feel that way too? Like, would you lean that direction?
I think I romanticize it a bit. Like I tend to romanticize stuff. You can ask Sherry about that. I always do. So I have this romantic picture of it, and I think I admire people that can do that. Obviously, even like you think about the. I always forget the name of what was the group that they had that terrible murder that happened in there? It was like not Hutterites, but
the Amish.
The Amish, yeah. And like
in Pennsylvania.
yeah. And that whole story was very, very beautiful. The way that they handled forgiveness and chose to forgive this killer, and even actually helped pay for, I think, his funeral and stuff. Like just this beautiful example of loving your enemies. So I think I romanticize it. But I also, again, I really admire people that are able to kind of like be like, yeast in the dough, right? And actually who are making a difference because of the fact that they follow Jesus and really do want to honor people, to love their neighbor as themselves, and to bring that into whatever work they're in. So, and I also, last thing I'll say, I know I'm talking a lot, but last thing I'll say is that it seems like, and I think we'll talk about this, but how can you not? Like, if you're a Christian, or if you're, like, we're all bringing our backgrounds into whatever role we have, right? So if you're in politics and you happen to be a Christian, it's like, well, and you might be like, no, I'm not gonna bring my Christianity into this. I'm also like, well, I can't imagine you being like, I think it would just happen, right? Totally. Like you would absolutely, your values, your plumb line is going to be different. You're going to have this like this, all the stuff that has shaped who you are today. So I think no matter what, you're bringing that into whatever role you have in politics or whatever. So those are just some thoughts.
Yeah, and I feel like I've leaned towards the alternative community model, and I've been learning a lot about this Joseph Daniel Esther model. And I do feel like I'm quick to criticize Christians in politics because of their failures and the way that they misbehave, or they do things that are maybe not my flavor of Christianity. I do though wonder where we would be without, and I'm talking macro, I'm not talking a particular administration or a country necessarily, but in thinking about some of the things that a Western culture that we value, I'm very glad that there have been Jesus lovers in shaping some of that.
Totally,
Like actually, Tom Holland says that a lot of right-left things that we've dealt with, especially during like the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes, yeah.
He argues were just ways of trying to be a good Samaritan. Like, think about the right and the left, like, as hard as this might be, depending on whether we're on the right or the left, but when you have like the left arguing for greater like love for African American community, right, with the George Floyd thing, or you have people advocating for currently with Gaza, with just like rights for Gaza or whatever. it's coming out of this, like, of course we would help somebody who is like disadvantaged and lying on the side of the road. Of course we need to be the Good Samaritan, right?
Yes.
And then on the right, when you have abortion, pro-life people going, like, we're trying desperately to love, in their minds, what is the baby who is on the side of the road.
Yeah.
And like we're hoping that someone is going to hear our cry. And even some of the anti-lockdown like voices where people going like people are hurting, people are not in community, people are lonely. Like there's this, and other people who would follow the government restrictions are going, but we need to protect from the virus. It was these like people longing to love their neighbor. Like, and so I'm saying, like, it's weird how loving your neighbor and being a good Samaritan is it's like the West is just trying to do it, and we're yelling at each other in how to do it. It's I've got a better way to be a good Samaritan. But the fundamental principle is that being a good Samaritan is good.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
totally.
we don't operate in a Hindu caste system, which is like, oh no, it's completely fine to be a higher caste than you.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Right,
Like, I shouldn't actually help the untouchables or the deplorables or whatever it is, right? Because they're a different caste system. They earned that through karma.
Right.
That's it. That's a completely different worldview. Or like the idea that, like, oh, the gods have favored a certain group of people in ancient empires and not others. And so, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Our Western culture is living the Good Samaritan story and are trying to be good Samaritans. I guess what I'm saying is that means Christians have influenced our thinking, our politics in a certain way, and I'm grateful for that.
Yes. Yeah.
Even though we're clashing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm still grateful that we're working to be the best Good Samaritan, even if we're an atheist.
Yes.
We're totally secular, we're an atheist, but we're like, we believe that people matter. I guess I'm saying that's a gift from Christianity, so I'm grateful for Christian politicians or thought leaders in the past who've not stayed as an alternative community, but have actually leaned in. I don't know. Does that make any sense?
It does. It totally does. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I think it's almost like if you peel back the layers, we actually all want, let's say the pandemic, situation, like we all want the same thing at the end of the day, right? I think we want people to be healthy. We don't want people to be, whatever, like losing their jobs or actually not having money to be able to buy groceries. We want this pandemic to be over quickly, for sure. Like I think that's actually true about maybe all people. At the end of I think that if you peel everything back, I remember David Bentley Hart once, he wrote like that, at the end of the day, everyone is looking, he made the argument, everyone is looking for God. Everyone's looking for God at their very base. Like even you think of the worst person in history, whatever. Like if you peel all the layers back, ultimately they are searching for God, And I think that's true. I think it obviously it doesn't. We still need to like tackle, like there's still bad behavior that goes on, right, on the right and the left, and so then it's like, okay, that's great, it's good that we're living the Good Samaritan story in that way, but unfortunately it's like layers underneath here, and we're already at this point now where it's gotten really nasty and really ugly, and so we do have to figure out what do we do about this, and that I guess that's sort of, as you could tell, it got pretty polarized, unfortunately.
Very quickly.
Okay,
a few things that I wasn't able to fit.
Okay.
First thing is, I want to just explain a bit more on the dragon and the beast. And I'm laughing because no one has asked me to explain more.
I was wondering if you're going to talk more about that. I was hoping you would, yeah.
Well, I just randomly throw out a Revelation passage in the sermon.
Right.
And I feel like, does everybody read Revelation this way? And it's like, people read Revelation very differently. So anyway, I think like if somebody was wondering, like, why do we say that the dragon is Satan and the beast is Rome?
Okay.
So in Revelation 13, we read that the dragon gives the beast its power.
Okay.
And so what I meant that to believe, I believe this means, is that Satan gives Rome or the Roman Empire its power. And so there's this idea that behind Rome is a satanic influence. That's a very dark power. And that Revelation is apocalyptic. So the idea is that it's pulling back a curtain. That's just apocalypto. The word it means unveiling. So it's just pulling it back and seeing what's behind the curtain. And it's like, if you could pull the curtain back, John the Apostle is saying, if you could pull the curtain back, you would see that this beast, this seven-headed beast, is actually empowered by the dragon. And so early Christians would be like, whoa, okay, like this is a beastly empire, that behind it is the enemy of our souls, who's empowering the beast. Anyway, so because Revelation is filled with symbols, it's hard for us to understand those symbols, but for someone in the first century, I think the symbols would have been a lot easier to understand. So like, without looking at the notes, if I were to say, and maybe you already did, if I were to say, today there was a political cartoon where a dragon breathes fire on a maple tree, what would you think that was about?
Maple tree, maple syrup, Canada. Right? Is this right? Yeah, okay. I actually haven't looked at the notes. Dragon. I guess dragon is bad. That's Satan. Breathing fire.
Okay, so sorry. I'm so bad. I shouldn't have used dragon as a similar. Well, today I feel like the dragon people would refer to China.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
I'm trying to read Revelation. I'm like, hey, what is this?
This is going very bad.
Exactly.
Our apologies to all our Chinese viewers.
Yeah.
He
Okay.
didn't mean that.
What? Wait,
No.
what? I didn't mean. Oh, I see.
Our modern dragon.
Right, gotcha.
Is not.
You just talked about how the dragon. Yeah, okay, yeah. Go ahead.
I know. I should have used a different illustration.
We all said some things we didn't mean. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, I think we're good.
I'm saying today, if there's a political cartoon of a dragon, breathing fire on a Canadian, it's like, oh, China is like really imposing its will upon Canada,
right.
or something like that,
Yes,
and we would understand it.
Yeah.
But I'm saying if you go back 2,000 years, the idea of this dragon and a beast, I think early first century folk would have understood this. And because in Revelation 12 we read a verse. Revelation 12:9 says, "The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil," or Satan. So it's very explicit in Revelation 12. But how do we know the beast is Rome? The beast has 7 heads, so it's a 7-headed beast. And in Revelation chapter 17, John tells us that the 7 heads represent 7 hills. And Rome was the city on 7 hills. 7 hills formed the core of Rome. It was the heart of the city.
Yep.
So when you hear, oh, the 7 heads are the 7 hills, oh, this beast is Rome. And anyway, people worshipped the dragon, Satan, because that he had given authority to the beast. Anyway, any thoughts on that? I know it's a small thing.
Yeah. Well, maybe it might be helpful for you to tie that into what you're like in terms of our topic today, right? Because I feel like it feels a little random out. I understand that, but it'd be helpful for you to clear that up.
Thank you. That's helpful. So the idea is that the alternative community model says, like, no Christian should be part of of beastly political powers,
right?
Because it's a compromise, and because in the end there's this worship of Satan through this beastly empire. Nothing good can come from it, from your engagement with beastly empires.
Yes, yeah.
So the best thing to do is to be the Jesus community you're supposed to be. Focus on loving your neighbor. Focus on seeking the shalom of the city through nonviolent love, and keep it at that.
Right.
Like anytime you tinker, no matter how well you do it, you're dealing with dragons and beasts, and it is not good.
Right. Yeah, that I have some trouble with. I feel like that's like it. I know you mentioned in the sermon you talked about behind the government is like Satan is. I forget how you put it, but you're basically saying there is like a demonic presence within the government.
So in the New Testament, when we read about the powers and principalities, sometimes we're reading and we're like, oh, they mean the governor or the king.
Right.
And then sometimes it's like, does he mean a demon? And I think when you learn more about first century Judaism, you realize that the assumption is yes.
Right. Okay.
That this gets into the Old Testament, gets into this idea of how earthly powers are connected to spiritual beings. It's a very fascinating topic. There's a author, he recently passed away, named Michael Heiser. He wrote a book called The Unseen Realm. Tim Mackey from the Bible Project unpacks a lot of this, but it's like so new to us in the modern Christian readers. Like we're like, it's stuff that it's hard to, but if like we want to enter the biblical story, we need to see that early followers of Jesus would have had a worldview that would say, oh, behind rulers are spiritual powers.
I guess for me, it just feels like so just to ask you pointedly, are you saying though today our governments that there is like, it just feels like it's slanted definitely towards evil, and it feels like it could be convenient as well, right? That's sort of like, it's like there are demons behind Justin Trudeau and, or Donald Trump or whatever, it's like these are all, it starts to get a bit weird really quick. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I'm not saying that I understand all this.
Okay, good, yeah.
I'm saying that this is something I'm trying to read the Bible by putting myself in, to see the world the way they saw it as much as you can.
Yeah, right.
And I don't claim to understand all of this. Where I think I'm like, oh, that's been interesting, is to be like, I can totally see how good people end up in government and end up doing beastly things.
Oh, totally, yeah.
And there's it's like I said in the sermon on Sunday, that's like evil's baked into the system in a way where you're like, ooh, the sum total is larger than its parts. Like, do you know what I mean?
I do.
And
yeah.
it's like people who are like, I'm trying to make this better, and it's just like, like it's bad. It's really bad. And I don't even know if you know how bad this is, right? Some leaders have known how bad it is.
Yeah.
But you can think of all kinds of regimes around the world who think that they're working for good, and it's demonic. It's dark. You're talking genocides and all kinds of violence, and you know what I mean?
I do.
So,
but the alternative is like, I'm just like, yeah, I guess I hear what you're saying. I guess I just feel like I'm not. What doesn't feel quite convincing to me is to say, like, for sure we know about, like, I think as Christians we both agree that there is a presence. Our enemy is among us. Like that we do believe in the Satan or Satan as a power that goes against God's rule and God's kingdom. I do believe that. But to say that it's built into this any kind of government system, like I would just say, well, we also know that we actually need government systems to do really good things as well in the world, and government systems have done really good things in the world. Of course, we know this, and things like our healthcare, things like like things that are actually really, really important. So it just feels a little heavy, like lopsided, to be like, there's like Satan's in the system. It's like I don't know. It just feels a little funny to me, and it also feels, I guess, if I'm being totally honest, sometimes Revelation feels like such a there's so much symbolism, and it just feels like to take a passage like this and then to grab that and to put it like 2,000 years later onto our systems and say, because Revelation has these images, we know that this is. You're not saying we know, but that's the idea, right?
Yeah.
It just feels like a bit of again, not denying the existence of evil at all.
Yes.
But the idea of just saying, so that it's baked into the system, every government system, that's sort of a thing lurking in the background. I would just say, well, how about we just take that part out of it and just say, we know that there is that Satan, we believe, I should say, that Satan is absolutely present and is working against the rule of God and is working against our own good and stuff. And of course that permeates, into government, but also it actually is in the church as well. It actually is in all industry, right? I would say that Satan is doing his very best to work against it. So, you know what I mean? I just feel a little bit funny about saying it's the government.
I totally get that. And I want our listeners and viewers to know that I don't have a perfect bow on this. I have found this in the last few years very interesting to at least think about, to consider. I wonder if some of the systemic injustices that you hear our culture crying out about, that it's like, you're not wrong. Like there's systemic evil. And I think sometimes Christians have pushed back quite hard to say, no, it's individual sinners.
Right.
It's all individual sin. And somebody goes, no, it's like there's a system that's off, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, and I wonder if this language of dark powers behind things, if early believers were like, of course there's a system.
Yeah.
Like Jesus can talk to Pilate, but Pilate was managing a system that was evil. Like there was an evil, there was an injustice in it. No matter how good the people are, there is something going on that is larger than its parts. But
anyway. No, I do. I get that side and you hear that a lot about like the mob mentality, right? When like suddenly something overtakes a mob, and Brian Zahnd, who an author that I like, I remember he said the crowd is always wrong, or I think he said the crowd, or maybe he said the mob is always wrong, and And I do know what you mean about that for sure. And I don't know, have you been in a situation like that where you're in like, even if like a sports play, like an arena or something where suddenly like,
100%.
and you suddenly almost can get caught up in it and you're like,
yeah.
you know, and it's like, oh, that got kind of weird, you know? And so I do get that. I think maybe I'm just uncomfortable with labeling it.
Yeah.
The government, therefore, you know, we've got, Anyway, but I see that.
Can I tell you a funny story?
Yeah.
Maybe I've told you this before, but it was year 2000, summer 2000, so June 2000, and hockey fans will know this, but it was the year the Colorado Avalanche won the Stanley Cup.
Okay.
I knew nothing about hockey. I was in a band, and the four of us went to a lodge in Colorado to record an album.
Okay.
This generous family from our church said, we have a cabin in Colorado, go stay in it. So we were in the hills outside of Denver. And one night we were like, it was like an hour drive to the city. And we're like, let's just go watch a movie.
Right.
So we drove to Denver, have no idea that it's like game 6, 7, whatever it is.
Yeah,
the Stanley Cup Finals is happening while we're in the movie. No clue.
Yes.
Know nothing about hockey.
Right.
And apparently they won the Stanley Cup while we're watching the movie. I don't know anything. And so then when the movie ends, we thought, you know how there's like exit doors down at the front?
Yeah.
We thought we'd just like leave out the exit door.
Yeah.
And it goes right onto the street.
Right.
We walked into a riot.
Oh, wow.
It was the Stanley Cup. Like everybody was in the streets of Denver cheering. It was like the Avalanche have won the Stanley Cup. And we're in the middle of like, and there are riot horses coming towards us.
Oh.
And like literally like huge horses. And we're in the middle of these people and everyone's yelling, go, Avs, go. And we didn't know what they were saying. We were just sort of like, go, Avs, go. And then we learned it. We're like, oh, they just won the Stanley Cup. And we're like, no way, there's helicopters above us. And the rush of being in that crowd, it was so exciting. And then after a minute, when we saw the riot horses, we were just like, let's go to our car.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Totally. Yeah, no, it can be those. Yeah, so I definitely get that side of it for sure.
Okay, I wanted to chat about the Dr. King quote just a little bit more.
Yeah, that was great.
I feel like I've been known to argue and say, well, like, even if Christians bring a positive political influence, all it does is changes laws. And laws don't change the human heart. So in the end, do laws really do any good? Maybe it's better to be an alternative community with a changed heart than running for office and trying to change laws.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So I honestly have said that to people.
Right.
But I love that Dr. King quote that I came across in studying, and at UCLA, for those who haven't seen the sermon, but just wanted to read it out. At UCLA in 1965, Dr. King said, quote, "It may be true that the law can't make a man love me, but it can restrain him from lynching me." And I think that's pretty important also. So while the law may not change the hearts of men, it does change the habits of men.
Yeah.
And so I think I feel, this is a personal thing, that this can be misused on the right and the left. This idea of like, we don't need a law, we just need to change human hearts. So like on the left, I think this argument can be used when it's like, we don't want to maybe find a law for abortion. Right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, no, actually you should change the human heart. And maybe it's up to the mom, who is making this decision. We want her heart to be changed, not a law to impose, right? I think people on the right use this argument when they don't like Christians talking about gun reform or fossil fuel emission.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's just like, those on the left are like, we need laws around fossil fuel emission. We need laws around gun control. And it's just like, hey, listen, there's always going to be guns. Yeah. And you can't change the human heart.
I like how you switched your accent all of a sudden.
Hey, you're always going to have guns. So, you know what I mean? Like, so I'm just trying to say, I feel like both sides can say, hey, let's not make a law. Laws don't change the human heart. If you make a law, that's fine, but people are still fill in the blank.
Yes, yeah.
And so without changed hearts, people will seek abortions, emit fossil fuels, and own guns, right? But I think Dr. King would say, and I want to hear your thoughts, he'd say, sure, it's true that a law can't stop abortions fully and can't fully solve our emissions problem and cannot get rid of all guns, but it could change the habits of humanity and give a sober second thought. I think that's you could, I guess in Dr. King, you could still lynch someone. It gives you a sober second thought.
Yes,
to say, I used to be able to do this without going to prison the rest of my life.
But now
it can create an opportunity for a better way forward. And I'm not in any way saying someone should go to a prison for abortion or because they carry a gun or because they emit too many fossil fuels.
Right.
I'm just using the Dr. King analogy. It's to say like, oh, if there are laws that kind of say, hey, actually, this isn't great, then could it give a sober second thought?
Mm-hmm. Oh, totally. I mean, it seems obvious. I would say it seems obvious that we clearly need laws. There's no question about it. At least I can't imagine anyone saying, like, actually we need a laws. Like, I think we would all agree that you should not be allowed to abuse a child. You should not. Right. That should be illegal. You should not be allowed to be intoxicated and to go and drive your car down Highway 1.
Or murder.
Or murder. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Right. Which may be the same. It may end up being the same thing. Like so. It gets tricky, obviously, when it comes to like things like abortion, because then you get into the conversations around, well, what is most effective, right? And it's like,
right.
I think that as I said, I tend to romanticize things, and sometimes I think in the past I've been like, well, we could just, like, I do believe that the best motivation is like the reward approach, like that seems to be great as far as parenting and stuff. Like I grew up, kids, it was very normal to get spanked by your parents, right? And that's not as normal anymore, right? In fact, I don't know what the laws are, but I know that it's I think rightfully so. It's become a lot more. It's like, no, you really shouldn't do that. There's been too many examples of quite awful outcomes of that, right? In fact, whatever, not to get into that, and I feel like things like seatbelts, it's like, well, we do that because we actually recognize that this will literally save far more lives, Yeah. I know it gets trickier when it comes down to, other things that are maybe not as tangibly clear in terms of what the consequences or outcomes would be. So I don't know. I totally. It's like, I believe that like a restorative approach to, this is more justice kinds of things. Like it works better. Like when we're trying to say, like, how can we make things better, as opposed to like putting fear into people. Right. And yet sometimes we need fear. Like I know for sure, I'm sure you do too, where there's been many times when I've been like, I will not do that, because if I get caught, I'm in big trouble. It's like that's actually not a bad deterrent. It's probably not the best final deterrent. It's like, but it's probably as Martin Luther King says, maybe it's just kind of helps me not get into a habit of something that is quite destructive. I don't know. I
mean, I'm not saying Dr. King is right about this. I think that is just a very great quote that I'm like, really challenges me.
Yeah.
Because ultimately I want the guy who wants to lynch Dr. King to know why he shouldn't.
Yes, exactly.
Not just be deterred by a law.
True.
Yeah. But I can totally see, from Dr. King's perspective, African American living in the South is not my story.
Exactly.
Like, it would be good to have a law against that. Right? And
it feels almost like a little bit, I don't know, you can see if this works. Like it feels almost like the mercy and justice conversation, right? Where they say like, the idea of someone drowning in the river, mercy is to like jump in and rescue this person, right? Justice is the person who walks downstream, right? To find out who's throwing people in the river, or whatever, like kind of the idea of actually, but in the moment we do, so let's say, to your analogy with the guy who wants to kill.
I hope if this was happening to me, you would rescue me.
Exactly. Not explain. Not be like, why you're
I'm going to go find the guy.
I want to tell you what you should have done. Yeah, it's like, as they're like, you should have been, it's like, so no, we have to have, and so maybe it's two conversations that have to coexist, like it probably is, because it doesn't, and I sometimes hate that when, again, I probably lean a little to the left, I would say, so I hate it when the argument for someone who is, let's say, whatever, who's finding themselves in a situation where, let's say, they are on welfare or whatever, and I sometimes hate the argument saying like, well, what they need to do is they need to stop being lazy, they need to stop, like they have all these sort of solutions as to how this person can get out of their predicament, as opposed, and not that I even necessarily agree with some of those arguments as to how to do that or whatever, or what they're based on, but as opposed to just saying, actually, this person needs our help right now. Like let's find some good systems that will actually help everyone thrive and flourish. Like clearly we're not doing that super well, so that's a great goal. But it actually doesn't solve the problem that's right in front of us right now in this moment.
Sure.
Anyways, I don't know. I'm just kind of
it makes sense.
Thinking out loud. Yeah.
Cory?
Yes, sir.
You good for a couple more? One more? Okay. So really quick, I do believe one political error. So I talked about the alternative community model, Joseph Daniel Esther model.
Okay.
Those are both, I think we have wisdom with how to apply. One political move that I don't think is on this is what a lot of people are talking about these days on Christian nationalism.
Yes.
So I just wanted to say, I didn't have time to go into it. It is quite complicated. Actually, there's multiple ways of defining it. But I did want to just highlight, I don't believe this is a good option.
Okay.
Like, it's not on my spectrum of good options. It's not a good one.
Okay.
David French, writing for the New York Times, quotes a couple of folks with good definitions. Sociologists Samuel Perry and Andrew Whitehead define Christian nationalism as, quote, cultural framework that blurs distinctions between Christian identity and American identity, viewing the two as closely related and seeking to enhance and preserve their union. So it's like to be an American or to be Canadian is to be a Christian.
Right. Yeah.
We might say, oh, this is a really American thing. I care about Canada in this podcast, and I want to just find, okay, are there ways in Canada that we see this happening
Right.
as well? The author and pastor Matthew McCullough defines Christian nationalism as, quote, an understanding of American identity and significance held by Christians, wherein the nation is a central actor in the world historical purposes of the Christian God.
Right.
So God has this special role that Canada is going to play that no other nation is going to play. And in America, some people have called it manifest destiny, that like America is like a new Israel that God is using in the world.
Right. Yeah.
N.T. Wright and Michael Bird describe Christian nationalism as moments when Christians are given special privileges by the state. So it's like Christianity is privileged. And here's where things get a little interesting. But a privilege can sometimes begin to feel like an imposition on other people of other faiths and people who don't have a faith. One example that I grew up with was people saying we must get kids praying the Lord's Prayer in public schools.
Right.
I heard that all the time growing up in Oklahoma when I was a kid. But I remember as a kid being in a public school and being like, okay, I'm in a public school, like my Muslim friend, my friends who do not know God, they're supposed to pray the Lord's Prayer. I remember people in my church were like, the Lord's Prayer, prayer back in schools. And I'm like, I get it if it's like, okay, right, we're going to have prayer time. And if you're not religious, read a book. If you are religious, go pray your own, I can see it if it's like this kind of, but if it's like, I think it meant like we're praying to the Christian God. This would be a special privilege given to Christianity in a public school. And I think what I wanted to say was what I'm discovering as I'm researching and reading is that is this idea of a liberal democracy is actually very important for Christians to see that it's a way for us to have Christian testimony in a positive way without Christian dominion.
Right.
So the idea is that like we want Christians in politics bringing the salt and light and flavor of Jesus. But what Christian nationalism is it's a dominion over, like almost like an authority over, rather than an influence. Because I would say that idea of like people made in the image of God is a beautiful flavor and an important thing for a liberal democracy, right?
Yeah.
I would say now forcing kids in public school to pray the Lord's Prayer, you know what I mean?
Yes,
is different to me. And I think trying to figure out, because I think a lot of people are quickly drawn to Christian nationalism, where it's like, yeah, well, the Bibles are basic for ethics, and of course we want Jesus' values in it. And you think of early people who, like Canada was a very Christian nation, Protestant and Catholic, but it was like Jesus was, it's like, well, why would we not want to go back to that? And so I just think we have to be really careful to say, I love the Lord's Prayer. I think it would be great for Canadian kids to be exposed to it.
Right.
But I ultimately want children or teenagers free to choose to pray the prayer. I think Jesus would want people free to choose it, to pray it or not, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so, anyway, I could go on here, but I would just say, French writes, he says, quote, one can welcome Christian participation in the public square while resisting domination from any faith or creed. And so, anyway,
Yeah, no, totally. I think I totally agree. And I sometimes have felt like that with in Canada, I remember and I don't even know what it was. Maybe it had to do with gay marriage or something. And I know that's a tricky one. And this is back in early 2000s, I think. When Canada became, when I think it was legislated that gay marriage is a thing. So
I think it was 2005.
2005, yeah. So, but I remember just being like, well, like it does feel presumptuous to think that the rest, like that all of Canada, and just to put it crassly, reads our book. And actually understands our book, and not only that, but actually looks to our book as authoritative. It's just like that's actually not the case, right?
No,
and
it's not.
So it feels, it doesn't feel like it's, it doesn't feel loving. Actually, it doesn't feel as though, not that, and I understand again, it is complicated, and we just talked about how we want a Christian ethic. That's the best option there is, we believe. But yeah, I totally agree with you that it's kind of like it feels tone deaf to assume. That's like, no, we all, like, we're the bosses here, in a sense. We're saying, like, we're our, that SNL thing, our God's better than your God,
I don't remember that one.
I think it was like it was like in the 80s or something. I forget that. Yeah, it's funny. But
can I make something about the gay marriage?
Yeah.
Because I think, like, one of the things where you say, rather than domination in terms of saying, like, hey, there's this authority over, I think the beautiful thing is that we're in we have a secular system. It's a liberal democracy. And what I think Christians have the opportunity to do is to say, hey, we want to be a good voice for the logic behind Jesus' values. Meaning, before we get to gay marriage, let me start somewhere easier.
Sure.
I think it's logical and, whatever. I think it's good for Canada to believe that all people are created equal. That's from Genesis. We've mentioned this already, right? Okay, I think it's actually scientific and logical to believe that a child in the mother's womb is a human life. Okay? We could have a whole discussion on it.
Yes, yeah.
And people could disagree, but we're not, so we're saying, we're like, if we believe it all has to be Christians, right? And we're going to impose this idea that all Canadians have to believe. It's like, actually, a lot of Canadians will never believe this. Right. They will never believe that maybe a child is a true human until a certain week, or maybe until whatever. But what we can do is we can continue to have the conversation, to add the flavor, to say, like, we think the science says that it's a human being. Like, right. And an easy one here is, like, we think that there's good evidence to suggest you need a day off in a week of work.
Right.
You should not work 7 days a week.
Yes. Yeah.
And did you know that, like, God has this idea called the Sabbath? Now, we're not going to be top down, like, imposing Sabbath. But if a government were to say, we like that idea, can a bunch of people do it who aren't Christians? Yeah. Right. Anyone of any faith in Canada, practice a day off. You'll like it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really good. I think, like, then when it comes to gay marriage, it's saying, like, I think a Christian could say, all right, well, like, listen, this is complicated stuff. We know not everyone in Canada will agree. We think that there's a blueprint for a family unit with a father and a mother, and we think that this is just a beautiful blueprint. If we were building a house, you might build the house differently. My secular friend in Canada, the house we want to build is one that's like a mother and a father. And we think this is the best place for children to grow up, to thrive, to see good fatherhood, good motherhood, ideally. Mother and father could be all over the place, all over the map. But we think this is a beautiful blueprint. You don't have to agree. But what we're doing is like salt and light. We're just we're contributing to the public dialogue, right?
Right.
And you may like some of our ideas, you may not like some of our ideas. I guess that's very different than Christian nationalism, I feel like.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Or making a law and say, like, you can't know. It's like to take if we're not to get into gay marriage too much, but like if you're saying it's one thing to have that conversation and to have that kind of influence. It's another thing to pressure the government to make sure that we need to put laws in place that they're not actually, you can't get married unless you are a man and a woman. That feels like much more like a Christian nationalistic sort of approach to it.
Right. I mean, I think there's a way that a country could go both ways on that and still love individuals, to say, like, oh, because you and I lived in a Canada before 2005, that hopefully still gave dignity to every person if they were same-sex attracted, if they were gay or not.
Well, they did. That was part of they did, right. That's part of the problem, I think, historically.
Right.
Is that, which we know, whether it's LGBTQ or whether it's
Sure.
sure.
Sure. And a country would have to hit that balance. Yeah, interesting.
Anyways, I know that's a.
Let's do another podcast on that.
Yeah, sure. Let's do that.
Okay, and then in the end, just to kind of conclude this, I just think hopefully we're going to start in the next few weeks to really unpack the idea of tone too, like in how we talk about politics. Mr. Jeff Renault, Pastor Jeff Renault, is going to do a whole week on how to talk about politics.
He's a good man for the job. Yeah.
Yeah, and we were chatting today about that, and so he's got some good stuff lined up for that Sunday. But in the end, hatred will not produce shalom.
Yes,
so nowhere on the political spectrum will hatred of our political enemies produce shalom. And so I don't think whether you choose the Joseph Daniel Esther model or the alternative community model, James 1 says, dear brothers and sisters, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. Human anger does not produce righteousness. And so I just don't think we as Christians, whatever model you pick, is just the anger that's fueled on social media. It's not going to lead towards shalom. Neither allows for that kind of hatred. It doesn't. Human anger does not produce the righteousness God desires. I don't see Daniel hating Nebuchadnezzar, Jesus hating Caesar. Jonah was actually reprimanded for hating Assyria.
Yeah, right.
So I think it's good for us to ask, what does our heart look like these days politically? And so, yeah, it's a final thought.
Yeah. No, it's true. I love it. Yeah, it's so true. Again, it's a great. The whole series is a great reminder about just that sort of the demonizing of the other, right? Which is what I think it ends up being so often. And so it's a good word. It's a good word to end on. Don't hate, just love. Just love, right?
Love your pets.
Love your pets.
Make sure they're spayed and neutered.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Spayed and neutered. That's right. Make sure your pet's spayed and neutered. Yeah. No, it's good. And Cap Stewart once said, "If you're fighting the culture war, you're losing."
Those are in my notes.
Huh? No, they're not here. Yeah, I just thought of that from just kidding. Okay, good. This is great, Matthew. It's good. Great. And looking forward to this coming Sunday.
Yes.
And you're preaching on Sunday, right?
Yes.
Jeff is on the following Sunday. Yeah, that's good. Okay, well, this has been great. Shake and bake. Shake. See you in Langley. We love you. Have a good one. Okay. At the end, I'm like, I lost track of everything. Where am I at?
Baby, you give me ice and fire. You're giving me